I never saw him again. For months, I convinced myself I could do it alone. I picked up extra shifts, skipped meals to save money, sold nearly everything I owned. But every doctor appointment reminded me of the truth. Love alone couldn't buy diapers, or formula, or a safe home. I cried more during those months than I ever had before. Not because I didn't want my baby, because I wanted him so desperately. One afternoon, a social worker named Mrs. Henderson sat beside me in the hospital. She didn't pressure me. She simply listened. When I finally admitted I was terrified of failing as a mother, she quietly said something I'll never forget. Sometimes loving someone means choosing the life that's best for them, even when it breaks your own heart. I hated those words, because deep down, I knew she was right. The family I chose had been trying to have children for nearly 10 years. David and Linda Thompson. They lived in a neighboring county. He taught high school history. She worked as a pediatric nurse. When we met, Linda cried before saying a single word. Not because she pitied me, because she understood how impossible the decision was. She promised me something that day. If he grows up with us, he'll never spend a single day wondering if he was loved. That promise became the only thing that allowed me to let go. The day he was born, they placed him in my arms. He had tiny fingers, dark hair, and the loudest cry I'd ever heard. The nurse smiled. He has strong lungs. I laughed through tears. So he'll make sure the world hears him. I counted every finger, every tiny toe. I memorized his face, because somewhere inside me, I knew those few hours might be all I'd ever have. Before signing the adoption papers, I asked for one last favor. I'd like to write him a letter. The hospital brought me paper and a pen. My hands shook so badly that I had to start over twice. The letter wasn't long, but every word came from my heart. My sweet boy, if you're reading this, it means you've grown into the man I always hoped you would become. Please never believe I gave you away because I didn't love you. I let you go because I loved you more than I loved my own happiness. I wanted you to have every opportunity one couldn't give you. If life ever brings us together again, I hope you'll know that not a single birthday passed without me thinking about you. Love always, your first mom, Sarah. I folded the letter carefully, placed it inside an envelope, and handed it to Linda. She held it against her chest before quietly promising, "I'll make sure he gets this when the time is right." After that day, I never tried to find him. Not because I forgot, because I respected the life I'd chosen for him. Sometimes I'd wonder if he liked sports, or music, if he inherited my stubbornness, or his father's smile. Every year on his birthday, I'd buy a single blue balloon, write his age on it with a black marker, and release it into the sky. It became my private tradition, a quiet way of saying, "I'm still thinking about you." Life moved on. Eventually, I opened my flower shop, made friends, built a peaceful little life. People occasionally asked if I had children. I'd simply smile and answer no. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it never felt like the whole truth either. 30 years passed that way. Until one rainy October evening. Business had been slow. Dark clouds covered the town, and the streets glistened beneath the streetlights. I locked the flower shop early and drove home. Daisy greeted me at the door, tail wagging wildly. I changed into a comfortable sweater, made myself a cup of tea, and settled into my favorite chair with a book. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. For the first time all week, everything felt peaceful. Then the doorbell rang. I frowned. It was nearly 8 o'clock. No one ever visited that late. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. A man stood on my porch. Early 30s. Tall. Dark brown hair. Rain soaked his jacket. He looked nervous. Not impatient. Just uncertain. I opened the door. "Can I help you?" For several seconds, he simply stared at me, like he was searching my face for something. Finally, he spoke. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" "Yes." His breathing grew uneven. Slowly, he reached inside his jacket. For one terrifying moment, I didn't know what he was reaching for. Then he pulled out an old envelope. Its edges were worn. The paper had faded with time. But I recognized it instantly. It was the envelope I'd sealed 30 years ago in a hospital room. The one I'd written with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes. He held it carefully, as though it were something priceless. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, he said, "I think you wrote this letter to me." My heart stopped. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. 30 years of questions. 30 years of hope. 30 years of wondering were suddenly standing on my front porch, looking back at me. And in that moment, I realized the little boy I'd kissed goodbye in a hospital room had somehow found his way home. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain continued falling behind him. I stared at the envelope in his hands, unable to believe it still existed. 30 years earlier, I'd watched Linda Thompson tuck it carefully into her purse before leaving the hospital with the little boy I'd carried for 9 months. I'd often wondered if he'd ever read it. Now I had my answer. He had. And somehow, it had brought him here. My voice cracked. "I don't even know your name." He gave a nervous smile. "It's Noah." The name hit me harder than I expected. I'd never been allowed to name him. His adoptive parents had chosen Noah. Yet somehow, it suited him perfectly. I stepped aside. "Please, come in." He hesitated for only a second before crossing the doorway. Daisy wandered over immediately, sniffing his shoes before happily wagging her tail. Noah laughed softly. "I guess she approves." I smiled. "She likes everyone." He looked around my little living room. Fresh flowers sat on nearly every table. Photographs of vacations, friends, and my late parents decorated the shelves. It wasn't a large house, but it was warm, comfortable, lived in. "You have a beautiful home," he said. "Thank you. I've imagined this moment 1,000 different ways." "So have I." I made tea, mostly because I needed something to do with my trembling hands. When I returned, Noah was carefully turning the envelope over in his fingers. "I've read this letter at least 100 times." He looked up. "I still carry it everywhere." Tears filled my eyes. "I never thought you'd actually see it." "My mom made sure I did." He smiled sadly. "Just not until she knew I was ready." I frowned. "Linda." He nodded. "She passed away 6 months ago." My heart sank. "I'm so sorry. She was an incredible mother." "I know." His voice softened. "She loved me with everything she had." I smiled through tears. That never surprised me. For the next hour, we simply talked. Not about dramatic moments. Just life. He told me he grew up in a small town about 3 hours away. His father taught him how to fish. His mother never missed one of his soccer games. Their home was filled with laughter. Sunday dinners. Camping trips. Family traditions. As he spoke, something inside me relaxed. Every fear I'd carried for 3 decades slowly disappeared. He'd been loved. Exactly as I'd prayed he would be. I want you to know something. He looked directly at me. I never came here because I was angry. I wasn't looking for answers to blame someone. I listened quietly. My parents always told me I was adopted. They never hid it. When I turned 18, I asked if I could meet you. My mom said, "Only when your heart is ready." He smiled. I guess it took another 12 years. I reached for my teacup. What changed? He looked toward the window. After Mom passed away, Dad gave me a small wooden box. Inside were hospital papers, a baby bracelet, a photograph, and your letter. He carefully unfolded it again. The first time I read it, I cried. The second time, I started wondering who you were. The 100th time, I realized I wasn't searching for another mother. He looked back at me. I already had one. A tear rolled down his cheek. I was searching for the woman who loved me enough to let me go. Those words broke something open inside me. For years, I'd secretly feared he would hate me, that he'd see me as the woman who abandoned him. Instead, he saw the sacrifice I'd hoped he would one day understand. "I thought about keeping you," I whispered. "Every minute. I even packed a tiny suitcase to leave the hospital with you." He looked surprised. "You did?" I nodded. It sat beside my bed. But when I imagined our future, I saw unpaid bills, long work shifts, a tiny apartment, and a little boy who deserved so much more. I wasn't giving you away. I was giving you a chance. Noah quietly reached across the table. He took my hand. "I know." I stood up. "There's something I'd like to show you." I walked into the hallway closet and carried out a small cedar chest. It was worn around the edges. The lock squeaked as I opened it. Inside, everything I'd never been able to throw away. The hospital bracelet with the words "Baby Boy Mitchell." The tiny blue knit hat he'd worn after birth. His footprint card. A faded photograph of me holding him. And a stuffed elephant I'd bought while I was still pregnant. "I kept all of this," I whispered. "I couldn't keep you. So I kept every memory I could." Noah gently picked up the tiny hat. "It still fits in my hand." Neither of us spoke. Some moments don't need words. After a while, he reached into his wallet. "I want to show you something." He handed me a photograph. A smiling little girl, maybe 5 years old, with curly brown hair and bright blue eyes. "My daughter." I smiled instantly. "She's beautiful. Her name is Lily." I looked up. "You have a daughter." He laughed. "I do. And she's the reason I finally came." I frowned. "What do you mean?" I kept thinking, if someone loved my little girl enough to give her a better life, I'd want to thank them. He paused. "So, I came to thank you." I covered my mouth as tears streamed down my face. For 30 years, I'd imagined this meeting ending with difficult questions. Pain. Resentment. Instead, this extraordinary young man had come simply to say thank you. As the evening grew late, Noah stood to leave. I should get going. I walked him to the front door. Before stepping outside, he hesitated. "I have one more question." "Anything." He smiled nervously. "Would you?" He looked down before meeting my eyes again. "Like to meet your granddaughter?" My breath caught. "Are you serious?" He nodded. "My wife already knows I came here. She told me, if Sarah wants to be part of our lives, we'll make room." I couldn't stop crying. After 30 years of believing that chapter of my life had ended, someone had just opened an entirely new one. As Noah walked toward his car, he turned back one last time. "We're having dinner this Sunday. If you're comfortable, we'd love for you to come. I nodded, unable to find the words. He smiled. I'll text you the address. Then he drove away. I stood on the porch long after his taillights disappeared into the night, holding the old envelope against my chest. For the first time in 30 years, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of possibility. But I had no idea that Sunday's dinner would introduce me to another person whose kindness had quietly shaped my son's life all those years. People often imagine that reunions erase the pain of separation. They don't. They simply give the pain a different place to live. As I watched Noah's car disappear down the street that night, I realized something. I hadn't gotten my son back. Because, in truth, he had never belonged to me alone. For 30 years, another family had loved him, protected him, and helped him become the remarkable man I'd just met. The question wasn't whether I could fit into his life. The question was whether there was room for one more chapter in a story that had already been beautifully written. Sunday arrived much sooner than I expected. I changed outfits 3 times, wrapped and unwrapped a bouquet of flowers twice, then finally laughed at myself. I'm going to dinner, I told Daisy. Not a job interview. Still, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Noah had texted me the address earlier that morning. It was a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes outside town. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalks. Neighbors waved from their front porches. It felt like the kind of place where families grew roots. As I pulled into the driveway, Noah opened the front door before I even reached the porch. You came. His smile looked just as nervous as mine. I almost turned around. He laughed. So did I. Before either of us could say another word, a little girl peeked out from behind his legs. Curly brown hair. Bright blue eyes. She couldn't have been older than 5. She studied me carefully before whispering, "Daddy. Is this Sarah?" Noah nodded. Yes. This is Sarah. The little girl smiled. My name is Lily. I knelt down to her level. It's so nice to meet you. Without hesitation, she handed me a crayon drawing. I made this for you. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a giant rainbow. Across the top she'd written, in oversized letters, "Welcome to our family." I couldn't hold back my tears. A woman stepped into the hallway. She smiled warmly. You must be Sarah. I'm Emily, Noah's wife. She hugged me as though we'd known each other for years. Thank you for coming. I whispered. Thank you for inviting me. She smiled. Anyone who helped make Noah who he is already matters to us. Dinner was simple. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh vegetables. The kind of meal that felt more like love than food. Conversation came slowly at first. We talked about flowers, Emily's work as a school counselor, Lily's obsession with dinosaurs. The nervousness faded one laugh at a time. For the first time in decades, I wasn't imagining what my son's life looked like. I was sitting inside it. After dessert, Noah looked toward the hallway. There's someone else who wanted to meet you. The front door opened. An older man stepped inside carrying a homemade apple pie. Gray hair, gentle eyes, a quiet smile. I recognized him immediately from the photographs I'd seen 30 years ago. David Thompson, the man who had raised my son. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he walked toward me. I've wanted to thank you for a very long time. I blinked in surprise. Thank me. He nodded. You trusted Linda and me with the greatest responsibility anyone could ever give. He looked toward Noah. We never forgot that. Tears filled both our eyes. I always wondered, If he had a good life. David smiled. I hope we gave him one. I laughed softly through my tears. You did. Later that evening, while Noah and Emily cleaned the kitchen, David and I sat together on the back porch. The autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves. For several minutes, we simply watched Lily chase fireflies across the yard. Finally, David spoke. Linda used to reread your letter every year. I looked at him. She did. He nodded. She wanted to make sure that when Noah was ready, he'd understand the love behind your decision. He smiled sadly. She always said, Sarah isn't missing because she stopped loving him. She's missing because she loved him enough to let us become his parents. I covered my face with my hands. Even after all these years, Linda had been protecting both of us. Before I left that night, Noah stopped me at the front door. I have something else. He disappeared upstairs and returned carrying a small wooden frame. Inside it, carefully preserved beneath glass, was the letter I'd written in the hospital. Alongside it sat a recent family photograph. Noah, Emily, Lily, and an empty space. He smiled. I think this picture needs one more person. The following weekend, we took a new photograph together. At first, I stood awkwardly off to the side. Emily laughed. No. Closer. Lily grabbed my hand. You belong here. As the camera clicked, I realized something extraordinary. The picture wasn't replacing the past. It was honoring all of it. Months passed. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Every Saturday morning, Lily visited my flower shop. She insisted on arranging tiny bouquets for customers. Most of them looked slightly crooked. Every customer loved them anyway. She started calling me Grandma Sarah. The first time she said it, I had to step into the storage room just to cry. Not because I was sad. Because I never imagined I'd hear that word. One afternoon, while helping me water the roses, Lily asked, Grandma Sarah, were you lonely before we met? Children have a way of asking the questions adults avoid. I smiled gently. Sometimes. She thought about that for a moment. Well, you don't have to be lonely anymore. Then she hugged me with all the confidence only a child can have. In that simple embrace, 30 years of quiet grief finally began to fade. On the anniversary of Noah's birth, we all gathered together. Instead of releasing a single blue balloon into the sky, we planted a flowering dogwood tree in Noah's backyard. As we covered its roots with fresh soil, Noah looked at me and smiled. You spent 30 years wondering where I'd end up. He rested his hand on the young tree. I think we both finally found home. Sometimes customers still ask if I have children. This time, my answer is different. I smile and say yes. I have a son. And an amazing granddaughter. They don't need the whole story. Because the people who matter already know it. I still keep a copy of the letter I wrote 30 years ago. It's framed now in my flower shop office. Not as a reminder of loss, but as proof that love doesn't disappear simply because life changes direction. Sometimes, it waits patiently, growing quietly beneath the surface, until the day it finally blooms again. If this story touched your heart, remember this. Love isn't measured by how tightly we hold on. Sometimes it's measured by the sacrifices we make, hoping someone else will have a better life. Time can never return the years we've lost. But truth, forgiveness, and compassion can fill the years we still have. Because family isn't only built by birth. Sometimes it's built by courage. And sometimes, the greatest journeys begin with a single knock on the door. The end. Thanks for watching. If you like it, share and subscribe the channel.